Enterprise in the future will have to think more and more of AI and trust together. There is one aspect of the transformation of the enterprise, which is the shift of responsibility of humans. Many of the jobs behind a computer in the future will shift. You'll be 80% checking, verifying, automating, and so forth, and only 20% managing an exception and doing by yourself.
If you had to make a bet, how do you think that's going to play out in the next 5-10 years?
The way I think about it is that in 5 to 10 years, companies will have to...
And you don't believe in that?
It makes no sense to invest $1 trillion in data centers if you can't make those very much information-driven processes automated.
I think over 50% of US GDP growth this year was driven by AI-related investments. Some people say this is going to unlock so much productivity. Others are saying, no, there's no way that a lot of those investments are going to recoup over the next few years. Where are you on this debate?
In the AI investments, the portion would be...
Welcome to a new episode of the Unicorn podcast. Today with Florian Douetteau, founder and CEO of Dataiku. Florian, you basically went all in on AI when no one actually knew what the promises are of AI or how successful it could be. And you also went in by building a platform, not a tool. You went in by building it from France, not in Silicon Valley. Like, you had a lot of challenges from the get-go. Why did you get started in that field?
I think that first and foremost, if you had the luck to be in the field of AI or any adjacent field for multiple decades, your starting point is actually to be very lucky. Yeah. It's actually to be very lucky to start with. When I started the journey of the company, talking about AI per se or using the word AI was not really a thing. Back in 2012, AI was something associated with the academics, with people with probably too much air on the side, and thinking a lot about research and having the dream of talking robots. Yeah. That's what AI was in the mind of the people. But when we started the company, there was this new thing, which was AI applied to business problems, and the fact that companies were more and more using data and machine learning techniques in order to automate day-to-day decision making by one order more magnitude than before. And this practice was called data science. Data science was about website or social networks pushing recommender systems in order to drive more audience and engagement. It was about having a manufacturer using their data in order to optimize the quality of their assembly lines. It was about banks that were using data already quite a bit and machine learning already quite a bit to go one step further in terms of leveraging it and so forth across all industries potentially. The starting point of Dataiku was that I was looking at this world of data science, meaning AI applied to the enterprise, which was getting essentially discussed about in the term created in the Bay Area. In the Bay Area, it was essentially looking at the pattern of some companies like LinkedIn or Yahoo and so forth that had built teams of data scientists, as in people with a mix of a software and a stat ML background working on applied business problems, and that were just scaling or building new products with those teams at the core.
And that was mainly algorithms, or was that really internal optimizations as well?
Internal optimization, okay, as well as online algorithms. Okay. It was all of the mix ranging from how to you optimize, your advertising algorithms to your online presence, but also potentially apply to any internal marketing or operations. And my thought was that it was not the way to think about it. That for most enterprise, a lot of the context is actually in the business, meaning people that are building the product or running the business, running the operations, have the context required in order to understand how to optimize it. The way I thought about it is that we should think about it the other way around. It should be about democratizing data science so that people in the business can do it by themselves as much as possible. If you're a startup, meaning you can think about yourself as a company with mostly software engineers and mostly data scientists or whatsoever, especially if you're in the Bay Area. You could be like 90% engineers. Great. And you're building one product, which is, because the product is like 2 or 3 years old, it's very simple. In fact, in the grand scheme of things, it's solving one problem. So you can think about it as a big one optimization problem.
Yeah.
If you're a bank, if you're a pharma, if you're an aerospace company, for which like, I don't know, millions of lives depend on you, if you're managing railways or water systems, meaning you have a complexity in your operations that cannot be grasped actually by a junior data scientist. Like, they don't have the context of this real life matters. And so from my perspective, it was very important to make sure that you could transform the enterprise from the inside, and that they could build and adopt those new coming AI technologies into something they trust. Like they would trust this new form of intelligence.
And was it, because obviously nowadays when we look at consumer adaptation with AI, but also even like business functions, you have a tool that's can be extremely powerful, but the people who are supposed to use the tool or who want to use the tool, they don't know what they should apply the tool for, right? So I think that was that something that you've seen as well over the course of the years, that people didn't even know how to use it, and how did you solve it? How much hands-on, almost like consulting approach did you need to give to people?
We actually managed very well to avoid, I would say, this consulting trap, even if it's not necessarily a trap, but like I think for us it would have been, and build the tool so that you can have people in the business that own it and start using it and find their way. So, of course, it's not easy, meaning it means that in our platform, you need to give training, you need to give examples, you need to put people in context, you need to build an ecosystem of partners that can help the customers and those things. But ultimately, the way to think about it is that, and it's actually back almost very quickly a very profound question. In the next couple of years, very likely, most organizations will change the way they work. They will automate more processes. They will use AI in places they are not using AI today. They will redesign those processes, removing steps, because you can use AI instead of this and that. Okay, great. The way I look at most enterprise is that you've got a portion of the enterprise that are people having a very good grasp of the business and usually are fairly analytically minded. Meaning they kind of understand the numbers, they understand design thinking and the processes and so forth. They get the big pictures, but they also understand the details. You know, and those folks don't have one title, meaning they can be something ops or something analyst, or in manufacturing they could be process engineers or quality technicians, or it's kind of like lots of different job titles that map to that. But like that's kind of like in every company, you've got a few percent of the company. If the company is very information driven, it can be 10, 20% of people that really understand the logic, the data, how things flow in terms of information in the company and so forth. My claim is that in the next couple of years, those folks are critical because for many enterprise, they are the ones that will transform the company from the inside, that will get a grasp of AI in all of its forms and actually use it to build internal products, internal solutions that will redesign the company. Because indeed, as you point out, you have many ways to use, let's say, ChatGPT. You can use ChatGPT to do many, many things that have no immediate importance or impact. That brings a little bit of productivity, but in the grand scheme of things, it's an offset to spending more time drinking your coffee. Great. But you can also use ChatGPT to change completely a process, to accelerate, I don't know, process of discovering potential molecules for a given drug, blah, 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 by one order of magnitude. You can use ChatGPT to automate the construction of the documentation of your aircraft engine. You can have like big endeavors that you can actually also build. But the difference between the two is that in order to do the second ones, like the big things, you need the people in the business that understand the business to, as you pointed out, understand the tool and start using them and start just combine things together to make bigger things.
And is that one of the reasons why you basically were building this successfully outside of the Silicon Valley? Because your thesis is that the people in the valley just looked at, in their bubble, what they can solve with AI for themselves and not so much within the real economy?
Yeah,
Was
I
that
think
kind
that's
of your reason to exist?
I think that's
uniqueness?
one of our initial reason to exist is this perspective that real economy enterprise have specific challenges that are misunderstood misunderstood by the Silicon Valley.
And would you say that is still the case, or have a lot of those companies caught up?
I think there is still that, quite a bit of that. Like, I think it's almost down to a question of worldview. There is a worldview which I think is almost a majority in the Bay Area, which is at some point there will be a version of GPT so good that almost every, let's say, enterprise problem can be solved by having such model read through everyone's email or whatever is in the drive of the company and figure out what the problem is and solve it or build the application that will solve it and problem solved.
And you don't believe in that?
Yeah. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that you have to wait GPT-8 and just give access to all of your data and all good. What I believe is that enterprise processes, when you think about it, and when you think about a bank, a pharma, an aerospace company, a railway, a lot of it is actually about trust and control. It's about like trusting the processes that are in place, understand the confidence intervals you have for those, like understand why you do it. I do believe that there is a reason to exist for every enterprise, which is that they decide actually quite positively to solve problems in a certain way, to do decision making in a certain way. Yeah, there is not one truth. Like every enterprise have their own way to think about this for good reason or like reasons they decided. And so I have to believe that in the world 10 years from now, 20 years from now, enterprise will still be that, meaning that enterprise will actually have translated their culture, the way they want to think about problems, the way they want to think about decisions, probably into automated systems, but in a way they do control quite a bit.
I think over 700 enterprise customers now,
Yep.
right? Have the conversations of the past years changed in terms of cost-benefit analysis from customer side, in terms of what their concerns are? Like, walk us through those changes, and is it easier or harder to sell?
To set the landscape, or so indeed we have enterprise customers. Many of them are large organizations. We have as customers about 25% of the top 500 companies of the world. And imagine what those customers are. It would be big banks and some big retailers and big. Okay. And all of those customers have already set up for a decade or more some form of data strategy. All of them have set some already have some good usage of their data to predict, to forecast, to optimize, and so forth. Which is maybe something that is underestimated by, I would say, by the general population. Meaning that a logistic company runs models probably for quite some time in order to understand the demand and the supply in various countries and optimize their operation based on existing data with potentially fairly sophisticated models. Mm-hmm. An electricity company do the same for electricity and get lots of external data and environmental data potentially to help, and so on. Like every industry is already data heavy and model heavy. Semiconductor company use AI and computer vision for quite a while to optimize their assembly line, just like understand if defects automatically or things of that nature. So you already have like this tightly integrated processes in place. The thing that is new, I would say, in the last year or so, and that we start seeing more and more with our own customers in terms of appetite, is, of course, not just generative AI, but this idea of agent, and this idea that you can automate processes of some form. And that's where the reason why it's so hard to grasp is, I think, because we lack understanding of the value, as a society, and understanding of just also what the vocabulary is, because it's so early. People building agents in now, meaning in 2025, as we recorded, are probably in a very similar situation to people building websites in 95. And if you recall, and I'll pretend that I actually remember 95, which is kind of true, but not so true. I was doing probably mostly C++ programming and online gaming. But yeah, probably already. But in 95, the concept of e-commerce was not there yet. Blog post was not really a thing. So the actual engine of what would make the internet something in terms of demand as an economy was not existing yet. But you already had everyone say, like, we have to build websites. And I think that when you're building agents today, you are not doing something that's more advanced than people building websites in 95. We are probably all of us very naive to what the underlying...
but if you had to make a bet, because obviously you're one of the few people in the world that has a crystal ball advantage of maybe knowing a bit more and being, having a higher probability of accuracy in predicting how that's going to play out. So if you had to make a bet, how do you think that's going to play out in the next 5-10 years with respect to agentic?
For the agentic in the enterprise, I think the way it will play out is that we will shift from thinking about the point solution, as in the agent, to the broader picture, which is like, how do you have end-to-end automated processes, which is agentic is almost a very human way to think about it. As in, the first thing you build is something that looks similar to the Asian one, like the new one.
AI avatar copy of
video. Yeah. And so what I mean, for instance, in the enterprise is this thing. Currently in the enterprise, you've got big, heavy, meaty processes that are very much information-driven. I don't know, for a bank, it's onboarding new customers or doing the ledger, meaning the reconciliation of everything. For a pharma, it's clinical data management, for instance. For a supplier, it's this matching of demand and forecast and supply chain and inventory and the schedule of your assembly lines, the maintenance programs or whatsoever, all of this together. All of this are people managing spreadsheets, manual processes, 5, 10, 20 people touching one given file. And in many large companies, each process I mentioned costs a few hundred millions, sometimes $1 billion, just to run it. And to some extent, they are not even processes that are at the core. Well, you could claim some of them are, but some of them you could say are not the core of the value proposition of the company itself. And as I mentioned, they are very much information-driven. I think it's a lot about like passing information from one person to the other. The way I think about it is that in 5 to 10 years, companies will have to redesign and automate significantly those processes in order to stay competitive. Why? Because it makes no sense to invest $1 trillion in data centers if you can't make those very much information-driven processes automated. The economic equation would make no sense, meaning as a world, as a planet. And so enterprise will have to go through this hard exercise of touching those fairly complex, fairly mission-critical processes, which haven't been touched forever, meaning they've been digitalized quite a bit in the last 30 years, since the 90s. But it's still kind of the same in terms of the underlying step-by-step and business logic.
There's a big debate of, how much of that is bubble territory. NVIDIA soon going to be the first $5 trillion dollar business company. I think over 50% of US GDP growth this year was driven by AI, related investments. And some people say this is going to unlock so much productivity. Others are saying, there's no way that a lot of those investments are going to recoup over the next few years. where are you on this debate, or do you say it depends on what companies actually make out of it, and if they have the right tools to unlock those productivity gains?
Yeah, meaning first, I obviously have a small lens in the sense that in the AI investments, a portion would be brand new products toward consumers, or way to consume information and new media and advertising and all of those great things, and gaming. Yeah, okay, and maybe that's end up being half or 2/3 of AI. Let's say consumer things.
But then there's another half, 1/3, where you probably know best. Yeah.
Yeah. Even there is in that third of enterprise, I would say ideally a good half, so 1/6. I'm trying to be precise, which is like where I'm actually way beyond my skis. Way beyond my skis. Which should be AI applied to more radical innovation. The full automation of factories with robots, any type of super science, and acceleration of discovery and so forth. The core R&D. Okay, 15% of that. Okay, kind of makes sense as a ratio. But still, indeed, 15% still, 1/6, let's say, of the value of AI should be just enterprise efficiency, and should map to this. I don't remember how many trillions of investments should down the line be 1/6 of it mapped to AI value, meaning value for enterprise being more efficient, more predictive, work being simplified, and all of those great things. Is it possible? That's a great question.
Have you done the math? Have you done the calculations?
Yeah, I feel it possible because when I look at what some of my customers have been doing for a decade or more, even before GPT, indeed, you can use data and even simple ML techniques to reap tremendous business value. Because you accelerate process, you realize that you can predict defect in parts of something, and instead of buying 3, you buy 2, and you reduce your inventory and the cash you have to immobilize. And so I see you understand that you can make your marketing campaigns more efficient by making them replicable from one country to another, and so you just you reduce the cost. I've seen those cost reductions where sometimes AI projects can reap millions, dozens of millions of one project of benefit.
Yeah.
One project. Okay. So if enterprise apply that, I think it's indeed something that is fairly realistic. I think that something that is underestimated is the information system implication of that. When enterprise will have built toward those mission critical use cases, like the onboarding of my customers in a bank is taking minutes instead of weeks, and instead of having 20 people wandering around, it's like just one human in the loop, for instance. And same for closing the book at the end of the month, like everything. When you think about it, enterprise that would have done that would have, in one way, shape, or form, re-encoded their business logic, their decision making somewhere. It's almost as if today the actual tissue of the enterprise, the connective tissue, is a mix of some business application there, but a lot is in the head of the people, or in notebooks, or even unwritten. Like it just happens, That's where enterprises are like big bodies, and they kind of work by a mix of culture and momentum and processes and controls, all of this together. In this world where AI has transformed the enterprise, all of this become an actual digital thing, meaning it must be written somewhere, stored somewhere. I wouldn't go as far as saying that the enterprise would have built a digital brain, but almost.
Yeah.
And I think this layer that enterprise would have to build in order to actually be able to become the future enterprises, like the one that are actually more AI first. Thing that's I find this a very interesting concept. And why? Because I think that what's important in this is this idea that every enterprise would have to write their own to avoid the pitfall that every enterprise would be the same.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the same question as is it just about having GPT-8 making all decisions? It's down to that too.
Yeah, so you kind of need to protect your own IP.
Yeah, which is, and today your IP is locked into lots of human brains are actually not written down. If you want to have your IP not just protected, but also valuable and actually used in the future where AI is everywhere, it means that you have to write that down somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't mean with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
In automated
Hard
systems.
code, systems.
You have to,
Okay, cool. I mean, you've been really an early leader in AI for businesses, which you had a thesis. You're very much right, which is a great success, and you've built a fantastic business. The downside is that now that you're right, a lot of other companies are moving into your space, right? So you have Databricks moving into your territory, Snowflake building AI features, Microsoft has Fabric. I mean, help us understand how you as a CEO look from a strategy point of view into that situation. Do you then double down on what you're best at? Do you think about expanding your services? Like how do you think about product strategy with competition heating up big time?
I think that the best way to think about it is it would sound very silly, but to talk to customers. In any given market, enterprise customers, they have a picture in their head of what their ideal market should look like. So in this market of AI, which is very big and lots of companies, and you've got Snowflake and Databricks and the cloud vendors and OpenAI and dozens of startups and hundreds of startups, actually thousands of startups getting in. Indeed, it can be a bit confusing. The role we have for enterprise customer now for quite some time is, from their own perspective, actually, to be the kind of layer that is easier to use and make it accessible for people in the business to build their own AI, and that sits on top of their data and compute infrastructure. So let me take a step back. In many enterprises, you've got a bit of this tension between various forms of people that are more associated to the business and, let's say, IT.
Yeah.
And IT has an important role because at the end of the day, they are managing costs and risks, which is not an easy role. And part of their mandate is to decide that for whatever reason, in this company, we will just use Anthropic, or we'll do all of our LLM calls through AWS, or we're going to store this data in this data platform, and this will stay on our premise in all databases because we have to we have to make all of those calls. And it's very important because down the line, it's down to who can access what, and security, and issues, and cyber risk, and ton of things. But what it implies is that in many enterprises, you've got kind of by design a fragmented data and compute ecosystem. You've got a multiplicity of vendors. And also this ecosystem, very candidly, changes every 2 or 3 years. When we started, it was a certain types of database technology, open source, called Hadoop, that was top of mind. Then it became more commercial. Then this moved to the cloud. Then you had new ones, Snowflake and Databricks. And then today you've got already new trends popping in. So all of these universes keep changing. And so the role we have in the enterprise is, from the perspective of business users, you want them to be able to use those tools in an easy way, but easy also to master and govern from the perspective of the enterprise. Because if you don't do that, they have 2 choices. Either you've got people doing nothing, like they don't really use AI or new AI techniques, or they do it in a shadow manner on their own. And maybe they do lots of things in Excel also as a side.
Yeah.
So that's the role we've got in the enterprise. Why did we end up doing this? To answer to your question of both competitiveness and how to think about it, by getting that pitch back to us by customers. As our customers or our buyers are typically people sitting most of the time in IT, but very much business focused, people in charge of AI, analytics, data strategy, AI transformation strategy. They are kind of like the person in between. And they're we need this type of translation layer. because we've got like this big IT thing that keeps moving and it's still complicated.
Yeah.
And at the other end, we have business users that thinks in terms of projects where there is ROI. So you have people going this way, people going this way. Can you be the piece that is kind of like sitting in between?
And so that's holding it together, basically.
Yeah. And so being the glue is perfectly fine for me, meaning worth things in life.
And is that kind of a big lock-in that you see? Like, I'm sure that if you can position yourself as the glue that is not interchangeable, then this is what probably translates into really good retention. Yeah.
Ultimately, the value from the perspective the real measure is the perspective is the value from the perspective of our customers, and from our customers, essentially, it's about in our case, the way we think about it is the acceleration and the multiplication of AI projects. So how many can I have running in production? So many projects can my business teams delivered? And so forth. Can I measure and track their value? And so forth. And that's actually how you build the retention. Meaning retention is not built out of thin air or being just a virtue of being perceived as indispensable. Meaning that's not how software works. At the end of the day, retention is just derived from the business value you generate and the fact that it is a fair way to generate value, but also in the long run, a way to increase that.
Has now, with the importance and also the budgets of AI investments, the buyer persona changed for you? Like, has it moved more senior, or is it in different functions now, or is it still the same as 10 years ago?
Yeah, you have some evolution because we're getting more, meaning you have more strategic view for AI. Mm-hmm. But your question made me think about a fact which is interesting today in the enterprise, which is the question of like, who is in charge of AI transformation? And indeed, it's a bit almost as if there was a tension between people in the organizations that are aware of the data and the risk and have been doing AI for a while. And at the same time, you've got a bunch of new leaders popping in and being like very hyped about AI, saying like, hey, we can do AI. And so you've got a bit of tension in some enterprise between the two, like some that are more like pragmatists getting in and almost OG people that are like, the real problem is this. And I think it's something happening. I think probably for any technologies popping in, there is like a form of a political tension. But I guess the way I think about it, maybe overly biased by who is my buyer today. Back 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you had a new generation of chief information officer popping in that were more like digital. Mm-hmm. Like they were the one which were about moving the company to a digital business and moving the existing IT to the cloud. Like, that was their building infrastructure, building digital assets. That was their mandate by a large extent. I guess the actual question is like then, who will be the CEO in the future? And my guess, and that's down to the same question, the CEO of the future will be a mix of someone that is a process thinker, because it will be about redesign processes, but also very probably, let's say, a data analytic person, a person that is able to drive not just a data strategy, but like a systemic AI strategy in the company. So probably coming from this background. So my point is that my guess is that among my current buyers, many of them, even if they are not senior yet, might become a chief information officer in the future.
You had already a few examples of industries that use AI. I mean, as a rule of thumb, are there certain industries where you feel that they are operationalizing AI way better than others? And are there some industries where you feel that they are left behind or kind of not really focusing? Or is it really a company by company?
I think the culture of the company and innovation mandate and so forth is actually today more impactful than the company sector by itself.
Okay.
By far. And so it's a lot about leadership, driving investments, creating a culture of innovation, being really focused and interested into pushing certain projects and so forth. Maybe to characterize a bit of the sectors, because it might not be something obvious to everyone in our audience. You've got certain industries that are by nature very information driven, meaning that a lot of the thing you manipulate as a company or the way you generate value is by being better at manipulating information. To some extent,
Which are those?
banks, that's obvious, but also to some extent, healthcare, life sciences are very information driven.
Insurances probably.
Insurance too, just as bank, like financial services in general and so forth. So on one side. And they were typically organizations that had invested in data for a while just because they had to, meaning potentially a bank is just data. And for some of them early adopters, but the flip side is that they are also regulated industries. So when adopting AI, the question of risk, the question of control is paramount. And that's potentially one of the blocker that could differentiate also some of the laggards versus early adopters. At the other side of the spectrum, certain aspects of manufacturing were historically less obviously data-driven, because in order to be data-driven, you need data. What changed quite radically in the last 5-10 years is that now you've got sensor data everywhere. Any assembly line has sensors. If you're producing, glass, you've got sensors everywhere in the oven to measure the temperature. An aircraft engine has thousands of sensors and is pouring data and so forth. So you've got sensor data everywhere that created over the years this opportunity for some of the manufacturers to get into data and AI more and more. And so indeed now I think it's more an even plane in terms of every industry, almost every industry, using AI.
How successful have you been with actually working and partnering up with government institutions? Because big picture, budget deficits are increasing. So I mean, you're originally from France. You have spendings that are out of control, and it feels like with process automation, business automation, there's a lot of data. There could be a no-brainer pitch to partner, no?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of potential value of data in government and government institutions. I think that it's a broader question of process and data management and, let's say, building application and so forth. That is something that governments are, let's say, there is a very different approach from one government to the other. You've got governments into potentially, I would say, as a pattern, smaller countries where you sometimes have like more integrated systems, almost a product mindset in terms of how to provide services, very much from the get-go.
Other examples that you want to highlight, like Estonia
Estonia, Singapore.
Singapore,
yeah. You've got, so in those governments, you've got a digital-first approach where you could have like every part of the government using data for efficiency and automate this and that. To some extent, you have a ministry of digital or AI or whatsoever, depending on the country, that acts, from my perspective, almost as a chief information officer, meaning establishing design patterns and principles and so forth in a very, let's say, down-to-earth manner, not political manner. And I think that probably the challenge for bigger countries is that similar as it is for sometimes bigger companies, but it's how you could drive this type of strategy in a consistent manner over time. I think that to some extent, having done entrepreneurship now for 12 years, I realized that the time frame from an entrepreneur is actually way longer than the time frame for any political appointee.
Yeah.
Because when you're an entrepreneur, if you fail, that's very quick, that's true. But if you're successful, you end up doing 1-2 decades, the same thing, and probably being very consistent. And even if it's not just you, and like it changed, like there is some kind of like a good consistency over 1 to 3 decades in the project, without stretching it too much.
And you instill a culture, so even if you're
exactly.
not there, there's a hope that
and there's this idea that you keep it. Political appointees, they've got 1-2 years, sometimes 3 years, and the next one is typically you've got lots of so it's a very different dynamic, and it's probably a very different way or challenges in terms of applying digitalization, AI strategies at scale. So I say that very candidly because I would probably fail to find a solution to the problem of making government more efficient with AI. I would probably fail very badly if I would try.
Because you have to, the sales cycles are just longer than any appointee is.
Yeah,
in office,
like it's
basically, and then you have to start
so I
from
wouldn't
scratch.
know to so I wouldn't know to approach it.
Okay, well, that's your challenge for the next decade, I guess.
And for someone else,
Yeah,
instead.
now that we kind of covered the topic of governments, also one thing that we have to talk about is regulation, right? So there's different regions that do their own acts and regulatory frameworks. There's the EU AI Act, where I think a lot of entrepreneurs have spoken in the field, have spoken out against it. So what's your view generally on the importance of data sovereignty, and also specifically, for instance, on the EU AI Act?
The way I look at it in terms of ideally how they would be perceived is that they are two very different things. On one end, you've got the question of data sovereignty, which is actually a question of sovereignty, not data, and it's down to meaning the practical question people want to answer is, if I'm a bank from a European country, can I make sure that I can operate with my local business principles without having another country being able to stop my processes or seize my data and creating a $1 billion liability? That's down to earth what it is about. Today, it's probably very clear that it could apply to financial services easily, but like to some extent also to telco, some critical R&D for life sciences and pharmas and so forth, energy, of course. Like you've got domains where I think it could be a question or a topic. The way I see my customers solving for it is that they solve for it by having typically a hybrid strategy when they are mature enough to do it, which means that they decide that this type of data stays here, this type of data goes in the cloud, and so forth. And I think it's, in the grand scheme of things, because they are building decade-long data strategy, it makes sense to have this level of sophistication. You cannot be naive or candid and say the world will be fine in 5 to 10 years. No one will try to hack my system from a state-level actor. It's not true. Like if you're a big company, you are at this, you're playing this type of game, and you have to be able to have this type of sophistication in order to provide your product and services to your customers in a continuous manner. That's down to that. So that's what data sovereignty is about. EU AI Act and AI acts in general are different beasts because here what this is mostly about, in theory, is to have frameworks to understand the potential impacts of AI and have some level of control around it. And I guess the challenges for organization is to wrap their head around what does it actually means, what are the actual risks, and so forth. And why is it a problem? It's because there is so much variety between what AI can do in AI projects and the implication by sectors that there is no one answer for everything. So you can have some AI Act is essentially a framework saying that you should have a differentiated way to think about it depending on like how likely it is that a given thing is risky or not. And if it's more risky, you should have more control in place. More control being fairly broadly defined. The issue of that is that from an entrepreneurship perspective, if you're a very small like startup, let's say company building a new product, starting with risk and control is maybe not the most effective way to meet your customer. And so that's why probably Europeans, and in theory, there is a way to carve that out per the legislation. But of course, the issue for many entrepreneurs is that the time they spend reading something, not talking to your customer or not writing code or not talking about your product or thinking about anything else is time lost.
Yeah.
So that's
and money. Yeah.
And money. That's the issue. But whatever. The positive way to think about it for large enterprise is that I do think, though, that enterprise in the future will have to think more and more of AI and trust together, because ultimately, from their perspective, AI will more and more percolate to the product and services they deliver to their customers and how well they are done. And so they will have to kind of like keep that chain of trust. And so AI Act, if you think about it this way, it's just like a very petty and simple framework, because what every enterprise should do is actually something way more demanding and sophisticated, which is like to prove to oneself that when they're using AI, they're using it in the right manner, there is no additional risk to the service they provide to their customers, and so forth, and so forth, and be very demanding on that front. The way we help with that with Dataiku, or where it relates to how we think about it, is that we think that governance should actually be first, in the sense that you should be able to think about your AI project as a big life cycle and make it so that you put the control early in the thing instead of doing all of the governance at the end. It's like every project.
Yeah.
You can always say governance at the end, as in like someone is doing something a bit dirty, and then at the end someone's coming in and say,
Yeah.
actually, this part is not working, you have to redo it, we will make a big patch here, And governance done only at the end is the best way to actually have more risk, to be more costly, and so forth. And I think that modern enterprise should actually have an integrated manner where, I don't know, when you start to build an agent and you build a data set for that, in order to feed that agent, you should almost for free and by design be able to know what was the source of the data set, who actually built it, who made the decision to add one column versus the other, so that if 1 year from now someone is asking and saying, oh, we have this issue with customer because of in this data set we did not use this particular column and it creates a bias or whatsoever, you are actually able to say this is the fault of this person and that process, but in between we corrected it, Yeah. And you will need to get to this level of sophistication in order to be a great company in the future, which is way beyond a way I act. It's like operating model when AI is at the center.
Let's talk about agents. So I think you wrote about this Faustian bargain of Goethe with agents that, sales, finance, marketing will each run their agents with their own versions of reality, their own, truth. And with humans, that's a management issue. With agents at machine speed, it's a disaster. So what do you mean by that? And walk us through that disaster.
Maybe disaster is creating a bit of a fake drama. But if you start, the main issue of creating, the main issue of adopting new technologies is that it's very easy to create new silos. Okay? And with agentic, it's way, way, way more easier than anything else. If you start having your marketing team using agent and generating lots of content that is not aligned actually to how your sales is pitching because they're using a completely other tool set, an agentic system, and so forth, you end up as a company with it becomes very, very difficult to just, let's say, create a consistent customer experience after the fact. And you're like, you're getting back to trying to create consistency. So the challenge for many organizations where they think about agents is indeed back to architecture. Architecture meaning that you've got an understanding of the flow of information to make sure that you've got common data being used. It's the right data. You understand who is in charge. If you change the definition of your product, it will percolate to marketing and sales in a synchronous manner and so forth, which is very boring details when I tell them this way, but the implication or the maybe best way to think about it is that it's down to this question of, the layer, the reasoning layer where the enterprise is encoding is know-how. In order for the enterprise to actually become AI company, they will have to build this digital place of automated decision making, and where the role of the human, the employee in the enterprise, will shift from being 80-90% being the person in charge of the transaction to being 80% the person in charge of inspecting this and fixing the errors in those automated systems.
Okay.
And it's a big shift.
Okay. Let's talk jobs, because obviously with every big revolution, industrial revolution, tech, internet revolution, there's been always the fear that, oh my God, people are going to lose their jobs. And, what happened in reality is that they just moved into more productive areas or into areas that required new jobs. Obviously, there's, again, this concern or fear that with AI and agents, a lot of companies need significantly less talent. And I can confirm from kind of for instance, the consumer tech companies that I've been building, that you just get the same amount of work with way less people. Is it different this time, or do you think there's too much doomsaying and concerns about that, and people will just get easily retrained or work in other fields right away?
I think it's about creating those other fields, creating those new products and new opportunities that will create new jobs. So there is one aspect of the transformation of the enterprise, which is the shift of responsibility of humans, meaning, as I just said, it's today 80-20, you are 80 running a transaction and 20% looking, inspecting. Many of the jobs behind a computer in the future will shift. You'll be 80% checking, verifying, automating, and so forth, and only 20% managing an exception and doing by yourself. So it's about like doing the shift. So one aspect of the retraining would be to engage people in this type of change. Of course, as part of it, you should have efficiency. And so the real question for the economy is also the ability for enterprise to innovate in the proper sense, meaning innovate as in create new products that can be built and leveraged thanks to the efficiency you've built in your core business. For many enterprise, creating efficiency just to optimize your bottom line is great, but should not be the goal. I think many enterprise will use it in order to repump into R&D and new products, and use that in order to fuel growth. I guess the part which is, of course, not answered is like, what new products are we talking about? And we don't know, and that's fine. Meaning, when people invented the engines, there was no idea of like what products you would build with engines in general or with electricity in general, and that's fine. No one would have thought about cameras or LED or whatsoever else, and that's fine. So we don't know.
But you have confidence that we'll figure it out.
It might be painful in the process, as any economic transition, but we will figure it out.
Okay. You've been an entrepreneur for now 12 years, right? So big picture, massive success, obviously. You know, raised over $850 million US dollars, right? Over $4 billion valuation, over 700 customers. Seems like a straight line. I mean, in reality, there's no straight line. So walk us kind of through your entrepreneurial journey. What were some of the pivotal moments you felt where it could have gone the other way? What were some of the biggest challenges where you were like not sure if you would make it?
Yeah, meaning we reached indeed an interesting scale. We just announced earlier in October, 350 million of annual recurring revenue, which is a good big milestone.
Impressive.
For us. Indeed, it's not a straight line. Ideally, when you do entrepreneurship, it's never a straight line because you're looking for, I guess, exponentials or whatever else. But the hockey stick and all of that good things. But for us, I think part of the initial surprise was actually when we started the business. And I remember it still vividly because meaning I still meet and see those customers regularly. It's when we, 2 years after starting the business, we realized that we could sell to Fortune 500 in the US the product we had, which was very different in terms of importance and scale compared to just staying where we are when we were in our comfort zone. And for me, entrepreneurship is quite a bit about constantly moving away from your comfort zone. Don't just talk to your customers in your network or people you know for 10 years. Discover other areas, challenge yourself because you actually have new competitors coming in and all of that good things. And I think that's the way I actually felt this type of journey. And I think how you grow, not just the company is growing, but also yourself. As an entrepreneur, you grow.
That would be my next question, because there's a lot of founders who say they're great from 0 to 1 or 0 to 100, basically. And then, it's time to kind of pass on to a more seasoned executive. Obviously, that train of thought maybe was more popular a few years ago, but a lot of founders think, or some founders think that way. How is your role now? as kind of the founder and CEO different than 10 years ago? Like, what did you have to learn? What did you have to unlearn?
I think I passed to a more seasoned executive, which is me.
Yeah.
I wish I was as young as 10 years ago. And I had exactly the same mindset.
Yeah.
But I think it's not the case anymore. Meaning I can't code anymore, probably. I could vibe code. Huh, that's fun. That's part of the journey. You just change. The way my North Star in this particular journey, or the way I thought about it, was in fact related to when I started the company. When I started the company, because this field of data was moving so quickly and so forth, I had like potentially lots of ways to think about it, or like, or what type of products to build and or areas to focus on. But the way I thought about it is coming from an advice I got from a friend, and she said to me, well, indeed, if you fail as an entrepreneur, it will be for 2 years, so you don't really care. But if you succeed, you'll be there for 10 years, or 15 years, or 20 years. Okay. So, what is the implication? It means that whatever the domain, and in particular, whatever the customer, the type of customer, the persona you're serving, you really need to love this persona, because it's a very, very long relationship. And I was like, oh, okay. And ultimately, I love the persona I'm serving, meaning the AI, data science, data people, the people that are in between in the business that are trying to glue the appetite of business folks to deliver more projects or to transform their business, but also the constraint of IT and that. Yeah. I love those guys. I relate to them. I'm like, I can sit with them for hours. I'm like, great. And I love the type of problem they have and that we're solving. I also love the AI space because it's a space that is forever changing. Yeah. Not that, meaning it feels very arrogant because it almost as if I've said that other space were boring. But like in AI, just as a fact, the underlying technology is changing every 2 years or every week, depending on who you. Stay paranoid. Yeah. Keep learning. So it's very. You don't have to force yourself to actually rejuvenate. So that's why, meaning I'm comfortable with the space, just because it's consciously a choice I made to stay in that space for quite a few times.
And I mean, every founder has this kind of moment of aha or pride where they're like very proud of what they've built. I mean, for consumer companies, first time seeing a customer with your product, or first time a billboard or whatever. Or do you remember that moment for you when you were like really proud of what the company's become?
Some of the key moments are very easy aha moments, where when you're stopped in the street, and so when you're doing an enterprise, especially we're serving large enterprise, so it's not as if I had 10 of thousands of customers, so I'm not so likely to but like when you're stopped by someone in the street and they say, oh, Dataiku, and I'm like, yes, and it's great because they actually don't know my name, but they know I'm Dataiku, which is good. Which is good for the brand. And they're like, oh yeah, oh my God, I'm so happy. I deploy the product and it changed my life. It helped me make myself a career because I help build those things in the company and so forth. And they tell you their story and you're like, oh my God, yeah, I helped someone build their career. And that's a great story. Yeah. And the other type of things you can do and so that's one of the aha moments. Another aha moment is that we are running for now a couple of years a program for nonprofits that use our platform, and indeed it's always surprising because meaning we are not in the grand scheme of things a company with that much means. So again, very candidly, we help some of them with our own time of our employee, but like mostly we also provide our software for free for them. And many of them do just very interesting things that you would not expect. For instance, 2 weeks ago, one of the NGO was an NGO helping students that were going from one country to another and essentially moving to the US to be part of programs where they could be helped in terms of situating themselves, meaning connected to the others as people getting into a country and having potentially that could benefit from help with studies and networking and access to job and financials and all of that things. And their story is that they started with 1,000 applicants of a small program and scaled that to now hundreds of thousands of applicants to kind of like hundreds thousands of people in the program, which is huge because they did that as a not so funded NGO of maybe 5-10 people running it. So having impact at the scale of the US, but like staying very, very slim. And the story is that they did part of that, and in particular the applicant management and selection process, like you manage like almost 1 million people submitting applications automatically by building the automation of that in our platform. And I was like, what? That's not the use case we had in mind.
But they did it.
But they did it, and like, okay, that's cool. That's cool because they were able to just build something with a bigger impact easily.
Amazing. So if you look back with everything that you know now, what would you do differently as a founder if you had to kind of start all over again?
Yeah, I'm never able to answer this question because I feel that every founder decision process is so much context dependent.
Yeah.
As in, feels like many of those decisions were very, 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 very context dependent. So
there's no patterns where you would say
the patterns are like, you should have done this. You should have done this differently. Not really any big one coming to my mind.
Too early. Maybe in 10 years you'll say, man, kind of looking into the future. What needs to happen so that Dataiku is, still winning, leading in 5 to 10 years from your point of view? Like where do you need to get out of your comfort zone again to kind of make sure that you stay at the forefront?
I think it's quite a bit about ambition, but in a particular sense, which is the market we're in is a market where if it's really, as I think about potentially transforming many of the big, heavy, information-driven processes of the enterprise, the market is just enormous, meaning it's like you can't really quantify it. It just becomes too big. So it's almost so big, so like, could we actually be a significant part of that market? Like if it's $1 trillion, what does it mean? What does it even mean? Like, what are we talking about? And I guess the comfort zone change is meaning when you think about it the other way around, with the platform we have, with the type of customer we have today, and the things you can already do with the platform by combining lots of different forms of AI in the platforms to play Lego with those things, and in a way where people in the business feel comfortable to do it on their own. It's actually a very good starting ground to be this type of backbone, this type of reasoning layer that enterprise use as a backbone for many of those very advanced agentic systems.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, meaning in the next 5 to 10 years, it's about to grow our ambition so that we can actually become this, even if it sounds almost too big.
Yeah.
To a point of not being comfortable.
That brings me to the next question. I mean, now everyone wants to invest into AI companies, right? Mm-hmm. You're still private. It seems like if you would go public, you would have way more, credibility with employees, clients, and valuations are great as well. Like, what's keeping you private, or are you just not there yet?
I'm building the company for multiple years to prepare it for public readiness.
Yeah.
And I think a main aspect of that is to continuously bring leaders in the company that have public company experience that help us grow. To have people in finance that have run public companies for years. To have people in various areas of the business that have been at Zoom or Twitter or ServiceNow, like all of those big successful companies, and are like bringing us their experience. Maybe to relate that to a note for potentially our more European side of the audience. I think one of the key unlock, but also opportunity for companies that initially started in Europe like us, but moved to the US very quickly, is that indeed you have to build this mix where in our case you have a product and engineering in France, but we are building our leadership team globally. And the reason why is, especially in enterprise software, a lot of the people with the experience of scale and the experience of speed have got this experience in the largest US companies. So you have to find this talent and build that mix. It's quite a bit of what is challenging, but also exciting in my job these days.
Talking about ecosystems, I think post-COVID there was this talking point that there's people moving out of the Bay Area, and there's a lot of different hubs coming, and remote work, and great companies can be built from anywhere. And it feels like the narrative in the last 2 years has shifted, and people and a lot of money and people are kind of coming back to the valley. What's your perspective on that?
So the way I look at it is that when you deploy your enterprise for global scale in the enterprise, you indeed end up with an hybrid distributed enterprise, which is, in fact, was top of mind in 2020, 2021, because we had at that time lots of enterprises that were growing fast and getting to this global scale, and the main narrative, as in like companies going from 50 to a few hundred people and getting global, and understanding that in order to actually find the right talent and scale, they needed to grow outside of the Bay Area, but also to meet their customers that were everywhere. And they could do it because of Zoom and so forth. And it still exists. I think the thing that people remember now, or has become more top of mind, is that if you want to create one product and be disruptive, it's way easier to communicate by being in the same room when you're a team of 10 or 15. And this can happen in Paris or London. I think it just happens that as a talent attractor for entrepreneurs and ease of access to seize capital, but also connectivity to the AI ecosystem. If you are building a brand new startup in a vertical in the Bay Area, and it is potentially niche, but you want to go fast and disruptive, I think it's one of the best ecosystem. Okay. So it attracts talents differently. I think that there is maybe indeed an opportunity for the various European ecosystems to discover that back to a little bit more.
Amazing. Florian, it's been a pleasure having you. Such an impressive story of building this company over the last decade, and as we now figured out, for the next 1 or 2 decades. And we're excited to cheer from you and see where AI is going to lead us.
Thanks a lot.
Cool.